About a week ago, Julio César Chávez Jr. was defeated by Jake Paul, our influencer boxing champion. And just about 2 or 3 days ago, Julio César Chávez Jr. was snatched up by ICE in front of his home here in Los Angeles in the Studio City neighborhood. His father, of course, is Julio César Chávez Sr., one of the most iconic boxers of all time and a hero, really, of Mexico, and a guy that has had his own issues with the law. Now, why was Julio César Chávez Jr. snatched up by ICE? Well, he's here on some type of expired visa, but really it's because he's wanted and he's been turned over to Mexico because he's wanted for very serious criminal charges. Now, what I've been studying recently, it's pretty amazing the extent to which the narcos, the top level ones down in Mexico, have co-opted, are supported by, possibly are the ones backing many of the big celebrities in Mexico, and that's probably how they're going to protect themselves culturally from real serious crackdowns. Julio César Chávez Jr., who was a guy that was the middleweight champion at one time, he fought Canelo Alvarez, one of the great boxers of our time. He lost, but he fought him. His crime, he was working for El Nini. Los Ninis were the top enforcement squad for La Chapiza for Chapo's sons from 2016 up until a couple years ago in their battle with El Mayo's people, La Maiza. So it's Chapiza versus Maiza. So El Nini got taken into custody last May. And he probably got told on by two of his former bosses, the Guzman brothers, Ovidio and Joaquin, because Ovidio, Chapo's first son to get taken into custody, if you remember back in September 2023, the helicopters landed, they snatched him up out of his home in Culiacan, and his brother then landed with El Mayo, remember last year, and El Mayo said he kidnapped him, and then I did a story a couple weeks ago about how 17 members of El Chapo's extended family, including his son's extended family, 17 of them came across the border several weeks ago, signaling there's a big deal in the works with El Chapo's two sons that are in custody, and El Chapo himself probably wants to get out of ADX. And turning in El Nini, one of their chief hitmen, was probably something they did. Well, he wasn't the chief hitman, he was the boss of one of their killing crews. And back to Julio César Chávez Jr., he's now charged, he's going to be charged in Mexico with working for El Nini. So while in the immediate aftermath of the peak of his career fighting Canelo Alvarez, he's he's doing work for El Nini, head of the enforcement squad for Chapo's. Now, he wasn't taking lies, but what they would do, if there was a guy in trouble, but he didn't merit being taken all the way out, they would grab him, they would set him up on a meat hook, or they would truss him up with a chain to a ceiling so that he would dangle like a heavy bag. I mean, you know what guys box on. They would hang their bodies up like that. Julio César Chávez Jr. would come in and beat him like he was boxing. Now, if you don't know who his father was, I mean, it's hard to compare celebrities. I don't want to, but sort of like, I mean, think of him as like a Michael Jordan. Julio César Chávez Sr. was like a Michael Jordan in Mexico. Like, I mean, he was the most popular athlete for many years. I mean, truly iconic. And his son, I mean, wasn't a bum. He made it to fight Canelo Alvarez. So think about how much different of a country, imagine, so Michael Jordan's son just got in trouble for drug possession and drunk driving or whatever. But imagine if he had gotten in trouble because he was, I don't know, like beating people up who owed money for drugs for the gangster disciples in Chicago or something like that. It would, right, that would be pretty like, wow, that's pretty crazy. And that's what's going on with Julio César Chávez Jr., the guy you just watched fight Jake Paul. He was beating people up. They would dress him up like a punching bag on behalf of the cartel. And he would beat him, not to death, but he would put the punishment on him, a little, some of the good old ultraviolence. So these are the influencers. These are dark people, the Mexican influencers. And Nini, who probably got turned in by his former boss, Ovidio Guzman, he was hanging out with a guy named Marquitos Toys. Before he got arrested, Marquitos Toys is a big influencer. The word toys means like expensive cars and helicopters, like stuff like that. Marquitos Toys, I mentioned in my story the other day about other Mexican influencer getting taken out. Marquitos Toys' brother was taken out. Marquitos Toys, there's a video of him and I think it's Julio César Chávez Jr., and they're in a Lamborghini, and they're worried about, well, where people are going to start to wonder where all these cars, like, how are you getting these cars? Turns out they were part of the collection of Nini or one of the Guzman brothers. And so these Mexican influencers are getting use of these big narco guys' cars. Now, why would that be? Obviously, they're using them for propaganda. And in cultures, all of Western culture, like United States, Mexico, South America, Canada, celebrities are worshipped. So imagine you're a gangster. If you have someone that's a celebrity, you got the son of the most iconic boxer of Mexico, and he's beating people up for you, that adds to your clout, right? Somebody that's got a lot of clout, he works for me. That shows you the power of the cartel system, of the narco class down there in Mexico. That girl that just got gunned down live in her beauty shop, she was, of course, dating someone affiliated, I think, with the four letters CJ and G, Jalisco New Generation. So they've really infiltrated the major influencers, and having someone that the world has seen fight with Jake Paul be your leg breaker, that's a feather in your hat. Now, it's all come apart for that crew. Nini is in U.S. custody, famously burst into tears when he got arrested, despite being responsible for probably thousands of deaths. But the Guzman brothers, the two of them are in custody. Any day now, we're going to find out the plea agreement they've made is probably going to be pretty sweet. Trump is going to be able to point to decreased Fetty Wap seizures in the southern border. There is a decrease in Fetty Wap deaths, though they're still extremely high, and these are all good things. But the dope business is governed by demand, because the supply is easy and it's so profitable. And if we crack down on the southern border, who knows what new things may arise. And I tell you about something very kind of weird that's going on. Or not weird, but just something different. So up in Canada, they've got the Dragon Cartel. Dragon Cartel is Chinese with people from Sinaloa. And what they're doing is there's a Mexican fisherman in the Gulf of, well, depending where you're at, the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, and they're catching this certain fish that's worth a lot of money on the Chinese black market. I think it might be an endangered species. So if a pound is, so if that little bit of fish is $80,000, I know I read that this was a couple years ago, that like $64,000 of precursors equals something like 100 bricks of Fetty that they could sell wholesale in the U.S. for $35,000 each. Yeah, I think you could make off 64,000. You make like 3.5 million. They're making like 100 to 1 from the precursor chemicals to the wholesale value of the Fetty Wap. That's why the Fetty Wap is so, that such a profitable business for them. So where I had my office in LA in the wholesale district was a lot of Chinese, Mexican, and other import-export clothing companies. And every couple years, the feds will run through and indict. Well, they would raid places and indict people for money laundering. And what was going on is, okay, so say I'm running some cartel activities. I'm collecting money here in LA from Fetty Wap, say, that's being pushed over here. And my bosses in Mexico owe money to people in China. So I just simply take the money to one of these clothing places, one of these wholesalers, and I turn in a couple million there. That pays for the precursors. It also can go into the Chinese banking system and be laundered. Well, now up in Canada, we can just catch some fish and probably give the Chinese gangsters some of this fish to pay our precursor bill. So imagine we're at the highest levels of organized crime. You can go out and catch some of these fish and pay for enough precursors to make yourself hundreds of millions or tens of millions of dollars in profit. Pretty wild. It shows you how unstoppable this business is as long as there's a demand. As you have so many people that want to reach a state of oblivion, because make no mistake, I think if you're doing Fetty Wap, you're messing with the MBTHOD man, or even smoking Krizak, or even smoking an Afazah every day. You're trying to be in some type of state of oblivion. You're not just getting quote unquote high. Like you're wanting to leave reality, because the reality of this modern world that the tech giants have now, or the worst people of all, but that's another story, have taken over. So I'm kind of getting philosophical here, as I'm wont to do, but Julio César Chávez Jr., who fought one of the world's biggest influencers, Jake Paul, just last week, he's going down to Mexico to face charges for beating people up that would be hung up like a sack of meat, like a punching bag, for El Nini, who was working for Chapiza. And I think that they probably turned him in as part of their plea agreement, because he's one of the dangerous people who's in control of a bunch of the sicarios. So pretty wild what's going on. And the larger scale story is the battle between the people that's down with Maiza and Chapiza's remnants. But Chapiza is now doing bad. 2 of them are in custody. They grabbed Mayo. They're making this plea deal. Expect for it to be kind of sweet. 17 members, Chapo's family, have fled into the U.S., so I think that means they lost. But what they did do, because they do have a lot of contacts, they're the ones, they got their hooks into a lot of celebrities. They got people, I think they have better contacts on the U.S. side of the border with the distribution, and they have a lot of government contacts than Mentro's people, CJNG. There was just an announcement, and I'll do another story on this, of an alliance between the remnants of, well, not remnants, between Chapiza and CJNG. So, will the Mexican government, will the U.S. government do another thing like they did back in the day, where they sort of pick a group and back them up? Or or what? Because CJNG and Chapiza together are going to try to wipe out Mayo. And at some point, these groups are going to want to consolidate, and they're becoming like mini governments. 35% of Mexico, the Mexican government itself doesn't feel like is under their control at all. And these groups are building hospitals and schools in small towns and the rural areas and getting the people's loyalty because, after all, I mean, a government, if all they do is come in and arrest people or take taxes, why would you like them any more than you liked the dope dealers who maybe tax you too, but at least they build a school and they provide some protection because they got men with guns there. So I think we have a failed state south of the border, but what's interesting to me especially is the interplay between the celebrities and the narcos on top. And all over TikTok and IG, they're recruiting young people, just like in the United States, where these gangster rappers, drill rappers, like things you never heard of. I bet you there's people that have started BD chapters just because of listening to Chicago rap music all around the country. You got GDs in Brooklyn and all this stuff. I think in the U.S. it's not really being done on purpose. It's just kind of what's happening from the music. But down there, they're using the celebrities to make the narco and their different groups seem like something to be a part of, and they're all on TikTok and Instagram recruiting. They'll go on CJNG, all of them, Aiza, they go on TikTok, they post videos, they'll say, come meet in the town square of this little city at 10 o'clock if you want to be down, and that's how they recruit people. So this ability for all of us to communicate in an unrestricted way has changed the nature of everything, including CRIME. But Julio César Chávez Jr. taken into custody by Trump's ICE squad for doing work for Chapo's crew, Al Prophet America Dope.